My name is Tom Blank, and this is Behind the Lens, an ongoing conversation about all things relating to the art of film in the city of Eugene, Oregon. Today, my guest is Mike Dilley. Mike is the founder, director of the Eugene International Film Festival, an annual event which we enjoy here. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Tom. Thank you for inviting me to join you.
Well, we want to find a little bit about yourself, Mike. Can you tell us how you became interested in film in the first place?
I can. My mom would drop me off as a child at the McDonald Theater here in town because she could leave me there, and it was cheap babysitting. And I ended up watching a movie called Peter Pan, probably 14 or 15 times over several days. And she was delighted because I was out of her hair. And many years later, I rented it when it became available as a rental. I was totally devastated when I looked at it and I realized it was not, in fact, a documentary.
Well, what a disappointment. The things that inspire us when we're young are not necessarily the things that inspire us when we achieve some majority and some possibility of understanding what we're looking at. But one of the things that is of interest to me about the grand old theaters is the sense of ritual that we all experienced when we went to them as children, and the sense of the lights go down, we see stars in the sky, and the music starts and the curtain rises, and we have anticipation.
That's right.
This is different from how we watch movies now.
Yeah, well, in the theater experience, even still today, it's almost like our heartbeats get into sync when we walk into the theater and we're watching a movie. There's that group gasp when something happens on screen, and I kind of miss that when I'm just looking at a screen, at home or something like that. And so occasionally, I like to go out to the theater, and that's part of my reason for enjoying the film festival. Is it keeps me involved in a business that I have grown up respecting and really enjoyed the people, and I really liked the experience. And so I've kind of mixed a little of the modern with some of the old.
So what is your feeling about the viewership of the modern audiences? What changes have you discovered?
Well, I can't really define the experience they're having other than to say it's different. I enjoyed going to the movies and holding hands with a young lady, and now I think about people who are hanging on to an appliance looking at at a movie. That's a different experience. I don't know that anybody will ultimately have any significant difference in a life experience as a result of that, but growing up, I enjoyed going to a movie with people.
Well, I think that there is a distinct difference. I think I may have told you earlier that I read an article in the New York Times earlier in the week about the psychological advantage of experiencing the sense of awe.
Yes.
That I was describing about what happened when the lights went out in the old-time theaters. And that what the article said was that the people who are exposed to awe are better people.
Yes.
They have been tested after the awe experiences as being more generous, more compassionate, more understanding. And I think that's a quality in the nature of the American film audience that will diminish.
Yes, it's going to change somehow. Yeah. That's for certain. And there is something about personal interaction that is really, really valuable. It's valuable. I mean, they've determined that it's very valuable from the standpoint of education, that kids who are raised in an agrarian environment have a different sense of awe, if you will, from people who are raised in an urban environment, and they tend to have some pretty good survival skills, and they're very productive in society.
And if we look at the great filmmakers, I think we can find a trend of people that had, as children, the same film experience that you and I are talking about.
Mm-hmm.
That they went to movies, and movies were things that inspired them, and that they had come to love in some way, in some flavor.
Yeah. No, and movies still inspire. It's just the audience right now is different than, you know, I mean, there are people who go to the movies and go to the theater and they are inspired. And whether it's fiction or documentary or, you know, comedy or whatever it is, they are still inspirational. And I think that it's incredibly valuable in society to be able to experience those things in different cultures, different ways of thinking, and movies prevent a safe environment for people to experience those kinds of things.
Yeah, and it works in all these different formats and genres. The idea of a safe environment allows you to experience tragedy in the Titanic, or experience horror in the Nightmare on Elm Street type of format. And when you come out, lo and behold, you're still whole and safe.
Yes. Yeah, it's like spending 2 hours with the Godfather, and you're not going to die as a result of hanging out with him.
Yeah, or you won't even have a bad reputation.
Yeah, right.
So, you know, what's going on with you in your movie life today?
Well, I still do work on call from time to time with the major networks. I get sent out on news assignments, and I really enjoy it. I get a few a year, and it really keeps me, like I said, it keeps me social and in the work environment. And I've done it for a long time. I don't take any stress home with me. I just go do the job, and I get to do some pretty neat stuff. I've done a lot of work with being here in Eugene, UFO Sports, but I've covered things like I've been involved in crews on earthquake. You know, I was involved in some of the discussion about the dock strikes that were recently in the news and things like that. So I still experience that. From a filmmaking standpoint, I do have some projects that I keep tinkering with, and I think, you know, maybe they're on my bucket list, you know, and something will come of them. Years ago, probably 30 years ago now, I shot 16 millimeter film at the time. It was quite an expensive project. I did it on my own, of the birth of American brewing renaissance, and it took place in the Pacific Northwest, which was British Columbia, Oregon, and Washington. They were the first post-prohibition brew pubs. There were microbreweries in a couple of places, but brew pubs. And I documented that, and I hope to finish that into a documentary, and to be able now, 30 years later, incorporate the growth of the industry and to expand on the personalities that I captured in those first scenes that I shot.
So what you're saying is that you have another life as a documentarian.
Yes.
And a filmmaker in your own right.
Yeah.
And that as a filmmaker, you have a point of view.
Yes.
And that one of the things about learning to view movies is the understanding that no matter what kind of film you're viewing, story movie, narrative film, documentary, they all have a point of view.
You bet.
And as such, you can't escape propaganda.
Well, yeah, right. I mean, for instance, I decided, first of all, I'll just go back to reflect on the footage that I got in the 80s on the rebirth of American brewing. It was really about the changing technology that took place in the brewing industry and the personalities that were involved in it. They were mostly home brewers, and many of the little breweries that they started in their kitchen are now some of the biggest breweries, you know, in the craft brewing field. But now, I'm looking back on it 30 years later, and I'm thinking, I really don't want so much technology. I'm going to look at that more when I finish it as B-roll, and I'm going to talk more about the personalities and the social structure that has taken place, development of social interaction as a result of the brew pub, and really get more into the personalities of people and their experiences.
Well, I'll look forward to that.
Me too.
The thing that you mentioned about the quality of the human as expressed in film is, I think, one of enormous importance, and that when people think about film, they should be alert to their own response to whatever they're looking at. Because if you find yourself reacting to the humanity of the subject of the film, you are also telling yourself about something that's happening in you. And so whatever movies we see, we have a different lens turned onto our own experience.
Yes. And part of the purpose of the festival is we network, we do outreach with other nonprofits who have a particular community benefit point of view, and we try to match a film, you know, with an organization and help them get their message across. And it's really rewarding to do that. The films are educational, some of them are very dramatic, and some of them are some pretty tough subjects, but it's a good place to see them, again, safely. And I really enjoy doing that kind of presentation within the community and building strength within the community.
Tell me some more about the festival, the Eugene International Film Festival. How long have you been doing it?
Well, the festival, this is our 10th year, and we're going to celebrate the 10th year by bringing forward some of the films from the first years of the festival. I've done a rough draft of what I might end up programming, and I don't have enough screens to program it all. I mean, I just went through and picked the cream of the crop. It's somewhere around 65, 67 hours of time. Plus, I don't have the films from this year yet. The submissions are just beginning to come in this year. And
how many pictures do they are often submitted to you?
It varies, several hundred. We've been close to around 450 and as low as around 180, I think.
But out of 180, you can get a good program.
Oh, yeah,
You know?
yeah, right. Yeah, we've screened as many as 125 and as few as 64. It just varies each year. It's an open call festival. We never know what we're going to get. Some years we'll end up with a subject that for some reason or other there'll be a collection of films on a particular subject. Music was one of them one year. Legal subjects another year. Those kinds of things can happen in the festival, and you never know where that comes from.
Well, do you pick a subject, or do you pick a subject once you get your submissions?
I never pick a subject. It is truly an open call festival. We have films that come in from around 40 countries worldwide, and then I have a jury pool of a review team of about 50 people. They're an excellent cross-section. Some have been with the festival as long as the festival has been in existence. And they look at the films and they rate them and use their recommendations then to pick the films that are a good fit with the community.
So what's the thing that you would like to really change about the audiences that come to your festival? What have you got to contribute to the people who buy your tickets?
It's a great social experience. It's more than watching a movie. And in some regards, some of the things that happen around the festival are more important than some of the films themselves. Not to diminish the film, but the subject matter and the conversations and the impact that they actually have on the community. As a cultural event in and of itself, it really helps the community economically because it is a big cultural event. You know, I would say if there's one thing that, you know, any festival director would say, I want more butts and seats.
Yeah.
There are more people who ought to be coming. The people who are there now, they're the people who belong there, and I know that there are a lot more.
Well, one of the things that has been of interest to me is the nature of the film-going public in the city of Eugene, that I have hoped to develop a more adventurous public.
Yeah.
And that, you know, we all have complaints about the nature of pictures that are being produced, and because they're being produced for a kind of cookie-cutter audience. Do you want to expound on
Well,
that?
yeah, I think Hollywood did a great job of branding the film industry from day one by creating celebrity status with the people that were in the movies. And they control the market because of that. The audience, I don't care whether it's in Eugene or wherever it is, they expect to see a celebrity. And they're suspicious of a film that may not have a celebrity in it, even though the film may be far better than something coming out of Hollywood that is running in competition with it. I see that happen all the time. When I talk to people in the community and say, you know, why don't you come to the festival, and they're suspicious of it.
Yeah.
You know, because they don't recognize, you know, any particular, you know, brand name. I do know in Europe, because I've traveled in Europe, I've been involved in some film stuff in Europe, and the audiences are far more open to independent films in Europe, and they will go see them. And sometimes those films will end up, you know, as a result of successes in Europe, come into America.
Well, you know, we've seen, as the decades have passed, changes in distribution patterns because of really money. That in 1975, when Jaws came out, distribution patterns changed because the studios got the idea for the first time that they could open a picture wide, as they call it, and only spend the money on advertising in 1 week. And all of a sudden, they'll get an enormous part of their expense returned to them almost immediately. And that kind of changed the way that studios decided what kind of product they'd put out.
Yeah, there's been a lot of changes in distribution, and they're happening pretty rapidly. You know, the loss of many of the brick and mortar DVD rental stores and sales stores has really changed the marketplace for everybody. And streaming and downloading have been replacing them. I think, you know, we're going to see more changes, and they're going to happen very quickly in terms of the way films are distributed. And
do you think something is lost in this?
Yeah, diversity is being lost. And we see films that are either identical to or replicas of past successes. You know, they're coming into the marketplace, and we don't see anything new in terms of some concepts and subject matter. It is, I mean, some film genres, it's pretty easy to make money in. If you've got $100 million and you invest in a big action adventure movie, you're probably going to do okay, even though the storyline won't linger with you.
Because of the world market.
Yes, right. There are enough people who are looking for that kind of immediate and brief gratification that the movie is financially successful. But culturally, it won't be around, you know, as long as Casablanca and some of the other films that we all recognize.
Yeah, we recognize and we love.
Yes,
but, you know, the quality of love that we extend to something like Casablanca is somehow connected to our own histories and the nostalgia we feel about revisiting a true classic.
Yeah. Well, it was so much about people. You just couldn't help but connect with the people that are in that movie. Personally identify with them. You wanted to hang out with them.
Bogart and Ingrid Bergman.
Yeah, right.
Let alone Claude Rains.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
So one of the things that has troubled me is the lack of expenditure on what used to be thought of as independent film. Because in the 70s, in the 60s too, we had a loss of understanding by studios of what was going to sell, and they saw what was happening with the new wave pictures coming from France, and decided that at that point they didn't know what would sell. So for a period of almost 10 years, they would give a go-ahead to a creative person rather than a ironclad guarantee that this kind of picture would be a success.
Yeah.
So we wind up with people like Coppola, like Spielberg, being given a go-ahead to make expensive pictures. And some of the pictures that they made when considered in the light of the independent pictures, are just independent pictures made larger.
Yeah, yeah, that's correct.
And now, when pictures get larger, they're lacking some of that independent spark,
Right.
which is really humanism and compassion and understanding.
I think that there was a bureaucratic structure that began to emerge somewhere along the way where job preservation amongst the executives within Hollywood trumped the creative effort that should go into a motion picture. That they were the people who were making the buying decisions and giving the green light or whatever, as long as they went through the template and they touched on each of the points in the template, they were going to keep their job whether the film was successful or not.
Yeah, and when they were offered something that was innovative and remarkable, perhaps, it's a lot safer to say no.
Yes, that's true.
So we lose. The audience loses when the decision makers are not going to say yes to a truly innovative project.
That's right, and we lose some of that richness that used to be endemic to the movie, industry.
And I don't know about you, but I find myself when I'm choosing the movie that I'm going to stream at home, I often will go back to some black and white artifact from the 50s or 60s and say, I'll look at this again.
Right.
and I don't want to see these modern pictures that are just about lovemaking in ways that would have been impossible in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, right. Well, and I don't think you needed the blatancy in order to captivate the audience. I think it was maybe it became more blatant action on the screen simply because they didn't have the creative ability to do it another way.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that there are not good movies being made, but I'm saying that the good movies that are made don't make as much money as the movies that are patently less good.
Yes, yeah, no, I agree. But again, it goes back to what I said earlier. It's pretty easy to make good money in some movies if if it's a high budget action film as an example. I use that all the time, but you'll go watch it, you'll have fun, and you walk out 90 minutes later and say that was really great, and you'll forget it. 10 minutes later you don't remember it.
It's like eating Chinese food.
Yeah.
You're hungry again, and because of that we get this endless parade of sequels. Because the template that worked before must work again, and let's try to put the same elements in place in a new iteration of the same story.
Right. And some executive has been successful in holding his job down for another year or two.
Well, bless their little hearts.
Yes.
I say that from one side of my mouth, and the other side I say they ought to be horsewhipped. But because what can be lost is the human condition.
Right.
And in order to see the human condition in its naked form, and I don't mean lack of clothes, I mean the lack of coverage of your feelings. We often have to look at European pictures, Japanese pictures, pictures that many people won't go to because they have to read the subtitles.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I've seen, by the way, some films that we get films from Taiwan, and I would love to show them. And I've shown quite a few of them, frankly, over the last few years. And but I also have to be aware that the subtitle issue is what
it's a real issue.
Yeah, yeah. But boy, I have to tell you, I've seen some really great films out of Taiwan. They submit a lot of films to the festival every year. Yeah.
Well, and there are other Asian film-producing countries that just get better and better. Korean pictures are getting better. Thai pictures are getting better.
Yeah.
There are pictures from the Philippines that are pretty good.
Yeah.
And yet those were impossible sells before. Now they're boutique sells.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of wonderful documentaries. I think that I find the documentary field a little more dependable than the narrative field these days.
It is, but it's still hard to sell.
Yeah. Oh, it is. It's a very difficult sale. But I've learned a lot watching them.
Yes.
And I particularly like the ones that are, culturally based, where you really look into a social structure, whether it was an ancient social structure or even a modern take on what a social structure might be like in a foreign country.
Well, if we go back to the history of pictures in the first place,
yeah,
there were so many documentaries from foreign countries before sound came in.
Yeah, yeah.
That the basic thrust of picture making was, I'm going to show you something you can't see in your normal life.
Right. Yes. Movies can take you places where you couldn't possibly go on your own, more than likely, yeah. The most distant filmmaker that we have had visit the Eugene International Film Festival came from McMurdo Station, Antarctica.
Really?
And the film was A Year on Ice, and it's an incredible story of what it's like to live in McMurdo Station for 1 year. It took him 10 years to shoot it, but it was edited down into a 1 year, sequence. Pretty fierce weather.
And it's a picture like that that is not immensely attractive to large audiences. But if you can get, as you say, the butt in the seat, you will deliver a product and an experience that may be unforgettable.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the highlights of the Arctic film was the camaraderie between amongst the people living there. And obviously they were a pretty special group that, they're comfortable at 150 degrees below zero and a 200-mile-an-hour breeze. They're pretty unique people. And by the way, they have their own film festival there.
Well, Mike, we're coming to the end of our half hour.
All right.
And already. And I want to give you a chance to say anything that's on your mind that you want people to hear.
Well, I would love if people would visit the website for the Eugene International Film Festival, www.eugenefilmfest.org. And take a look at all the films that we've run for all the 9 years are posted up there right now.
Thank you, and thank you for being here, Mike Dilley.
Thank you, Tom.